Right. And there is a change of guard at North Block because there's a desperate need for that to happen.
And frankly, it's not just the finance minister, it's also his team. His team is absolutely crucial, and I think his team agrees with him too much.
All right, but just to get your view on what Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw said, that we're actually sending a signal to the outside world that our finance minister is dispensable, our prime minister is dispensable. Would you agree with that? That a very bad signal has gone out in the last few days.
Well, you can't have a finance minister for all time to come. I mean, there has to be a change. The finance minister is entitled to enjoy life when he heads towards the sunset of his life.
Right.
So, I mean, I wouldn't agree with that. I don't think it's a question of dispensable or not. And I don't agree that an apolitical person necessarily has to be appointed in the Rashtrapati Bhavan to uphold the tenets of what a president of India should do. I mean, this is just a way of things coming to a head in the UPA.
Right.
Among allies, long gaps, differences of opinion, and a feeling that the UPA is losing steam. And frankly, you can't really contest that. The UPA is losing steam. It is losing credibility. You have had the Deputy Chairman Planning Commission say 8 times, 10 times that inflation will come to single digit, it will be 8%.
And look at the figures
exactly.
that seem to tell the story. So when we talk of the failures of the UPA government, Neerja, many would say that the mishandling of the economy perhaps tops the list. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I think though there have been scams, scam after scam, and I in my professional career don't remember them coming out with such, relentless, and that's a very curious phenomenon. I think the thing that has gone against the UPA government is its inability to control price rise, and is that has hurt the ordinary person the most. If you talk to people out there, different states, everybody is agreed on that. And it's all very well to say global factors. Ordinary people don't understand. And if you not manage your economy, and particularly one of the reasons why Dr. Manmohan Singh has lost ground is here is an economist prime minister who has not been able to
the architect of the reform process, so to say, somebody who was seen as an economist prime minister,
and
who
somebody
can take
who could have synthesized the need of the Aam Aadmi with the need for greater growth. So that synthesis and that middle path that Dr. Manmohan Singh used to talk about earlier, they've not been able to walk that path. So yes, that's a failure, loss of credibility, loss of moral authority to rule, and they're not being able to turn around a very difficult situation. Now, ironically, since yesterday, since Mamata Banerjee's bombshell, you see a closing of ranks of the Congress party. I don't know how they're going to handle it in the hours to come, but for the first time one senses something happening out there.
A test of Sonia Gandhi's leadership, the biggest test perhaps now.
In UPA 2?
In UPA 2.
That's right. Whether she can actually get her act together and actually get the UPA's nominee elected, because everything will hinge on that. If they don't do that, then that's the end of the government.
You've covered politics for many, many years now.
Too long.
Right. But have you ever seen corporate leaders being so critical of the government? I mean, when in the past have you seen top industry leaders coming out and openly criticizing the government? Isn't that something which is really a departure from the trend?
Well, it's a departure from the trend, but I've also rarely seen corporate leaders so deeply involved in politics. Possibly not directly, but through the back door. I mean, that's what cronyism is all about. And it's corporate leaders, it's small-time industry, it's big-time industry. It's amazing how networked industry is in government, when in fact all they have always been asking is to be let alone.
Right. So they say we don't want government interference, but they are most in government processes also.
I mean, it really makes you wonder whether the license quota Raj has been replaced by the license quota Raj.
Right. The Prime Minister is heading to Mexico and Brazil for the G20 Leaders Summit and for the Rio Plus 20 Summit. Do you think the developments over the last 2 days have actually humiliated him so much that he's a very weakened Prime Minister who faces leaders at a global stage?
Yes, I think the way an ally of the government has openly asked that he cease to be Prime Minister and become Rashtrapati instead, is not a very happy situation for the Prime Minister to be in, and at G20. So, I wish that it had been avoided at this stage.
Right.
And the Congress party took too long to come to his defense. If they took 18 hours, that reaction that came today should have come within 10 minutes.
Of Mamata Banerjee speaking. Right.
That's right. And I think the reflexes of the Congress party are very slow, and that is part of the problem. They are reacting to situations, they are not setting the agenda, and B, they are not reacting
fast enough. And that has been the criticism of the government, of the Congress party in particular, on a number of occasions.
Particularly in UPA 2.
Particularly in UPA 2. In that sense, UPA 1 versus UPA 2, what went wrong? When UPA 2 came to power, everybody was very happy that, okay, this is a government that does not carry the baggage of the left parties who have always stalled reforms, who do not share the same IG. But UPA 2 has turned out to be a bigger disaster.
Well, how to find the critical mass of acceptability of policy, it's really difficult.
Right.
UPA 2 was a little bit more empowered because it had more MPs. But at the same time, it also became a little rash. The left never put any conditions. I mean, they never said drop cases against us or appoint our people on SBI boards or get cases scuttled or anything like that. In that sense, they were very honest allies. But there were lines that they could not cross. And I think those lines were very clear and visible to everybody. Here, danger lurking in every corner. And despite the larger number of MPs you have, actually that tends to make you a little bit more complacent.
Before we conclude the discussion, let's come back to the presidential polls and the developments we expect over the next 2-3 days. If I could ask both of you the best case and the worst case scenario for the UPA government and for the country. First year.
The presidential poll, the worst case scenario is that even after 3 rounds of preference, proportional representation and preferential votes, there is no one who gets 51%.
Right, right.
So that's really a crisis. The best case scenario is everything goes off fine. Mamata Banerjee goes back to Calcutta, not happy but not sad either.
Right.
And there is a controllable slow burn which culminates in an election at the right time. That's the best case scenario.
Would you agree?
I think the best case scenario is that very clear. One thing is clear now. The presidential election, it is heading for a contest.
Yes.
That much is clear. I think the best case scenario for the UPA would be to be able to get its nominee through. The worst case scenario.
But we still do not know who their first choice is. That's the biggest suspense, because there is still a question mark on Pranab Mukherjee.
Yes, I think if they get the numbers right, if they get Mulayam on their side, then they are in a mood to field Pranab Mukherjee. If they don't get the numbers right for Pranab Mukherjee, I think they will be a little more conciliatory and explore the possibilities outside the 5 names that have come to the fore yesterday. Then that could be a dark horse, it could be anybody.
Right. Is this politics at its worst, or have you seen much worse?
Oh no, I think it takes its pointless.
There's never a dull moment, as they say. Clearly never a dull moment, and there is never a dull moment as far as the bookies are also concerned. Let's now take a look at what they're betting on as far as the presidential polls are concerned.
I'd like to see this.
Who will be India's next president? While our netas are still squabbling and making calculated moves, the math's already done by bookies. At number 1, Dada is their best bet. Put a rupee on him and if he wins the race, punters pocket a rupee and 50 paise. At number 2, hold your breath, the Prime Minister himself. The Congress may swear that Manmohan Singh will continue to government, but bookies have put their trust in Didi and Mulayam's choice. At the 3rd spot, another M&M, Mamata Mulayam named former President Abdul Kalam. Go by what they say, and it does seem Vice President Hamid Ansari and left leader Somnath Chatterjee don't stand much of a chance.
During the IPL, bookies reportedly lost a whopping 50,000 rupees. But they managed to call it right during Mumbai municipal polls. With 800 crore riding on this election, they are confident Dada will soon be India's first citizen. In Mumbai, Shweta Rajpal, NDTV.
All right, the bookies didn't get it right at the time of IPL. Do you think they're going to get it right this time around? Difficult, but it's always interesting to know what they're doing.
Or they are very close to the pulse. Normally, of course, it's a rapidly changing situation. Remember that.
Right.
It's a dynamic situation.
What we're reporting right now may change tomorrow.
Within hours.
Within hours.
Yes.
Exactly. What do you think?
Yeah, I think bookies usually get it right. And I think they're right this time also.
All right, will they be right this time or not? The big question remains is, will Pranab Mukherjee continue in North Block? Plenty of uncertainty there, but remember, this is what politics is all about. These are fast-changing developments that we will continue to track for you here on NDTV Profit. But at this point, we're going to slip into a quick break. On the other side, we're going to actually talk about a more pressing economic issue that policymakers are faced with. Rising inflation. Remember, inflation numbers for the month of May were released today, and they are at 7.55%. And that brings us to the larger question: are we going to see a rate cut when the RBI meets on Monday? And if yes, how large will that rate cut be? That discussion coming up after a break.
We have recommended to RBI to cut the CRR by 1%.
I don't think the monetary policy is a substitute for appropriate action. It can aid proper policy. It can't lead it. Temporarily, if we have to sacrifice the growth for bringing down the inflation, we should not hesitate.
Welcome back. You're with We Mean Business. Inflation is headed north. Growth is sliding down. The task for the RBI governor just got tougher. So will he cut rates on Monday? And if yes, by how much? That's our next discussion here on We Mean Business. Let me introduce our guests on the show today. Dr. Brinda Jagirdhar, GM and Head of Economic Research, State Bank of India. We've also got Mr. S.L. Bansal, CMD of Oriental Bank of Commerce. Ashish Parthasarathy, Treasurer of HDFC Bank. And Parvez Umrigar, MD and CEO of Wellspun Infratech, joining us on the show. But before we start that discussion, let's take a look at some of those big voices we've been getting on the possibility of a rate cut. Let's listen in.
There are pressures. There is a food inflation pressure. There is a depreciation pressure, and there is fiscal pressure in the sense that the actions that were indicated that would bring the fiscal deficit to its budget numbers have not yet been taken. So I think when we put all of these on the table, some factors suggest room, some factors suggest that inflationary pressures may still remain. I think we have to take a balanced view of these factors.
We can have high growth with high inflation. If we want high growth, there is a need to bring down the inflation down. And temporarily, if we have to sacrifice the growth for bringing down the inflation, we should not hesitate.
We have recommended to RBI to cut the CRR by 1%. So the economic rationale for cutting the CRR is strong as it has ever been. 7 times more effective than a rate cut. Where will we keep that money? It has to go back in the market. And when there is more money in the market, the rates have to come down.
Well, I don't think the monetary policy is a substitute for appropriate action. It can aid proper policy. It can't lead it.
Clearly, I think, interest rate, monetary policy issues are probably facilitative factors, but, they're not really, the most important drivers for mood towards investment. I think the most important drivers are two. One is there an underlying demand for the capacity that will be created? And second, what is the environment which facilitates or does not facilitate investment?
All right, so are we going to see that rate cut or not? Growth, remember, it has become a big worry. But will the RBI shift its priorities at this point? Let me ask Dr. Brinda Jagirdar to begin with. Today's inflation numbers for the month of May coming at 7.55%. Have they dampened in any ways the hopes of a rate cut coming?
Shweta, it's not just the WPI inflation. Let's also look at the composition. That's also equally important. But before that, let me just say I agree with you when you said it has become tougher for the RBI. Tougher not just because of domestic factors, but also tougher because of the very difficult external environment. The way things are moving, it's quite a difficult scenario, and in this to be able to say what RBI is going next is quite hazardous really. But what I will say is that inflation is one factor which RBI has been looking at closely. The WPI number that came in 7.5% is still above RBI's comfort level and the target level. But let's look at core inflation. I think that's where some kind of comfort can come from. Core inflation at 4.9 is still below 5%. So core has softened, or core has remained a little soft, mainly because demand has softened and also because metal prices etc. globally have cooled, which has now fed into the core inflation. So of course part of it has been offset by the depreciating rupee. So a softening core, or rather a core which is below 5%, would give comfort to the RBI on top of what we are seeing happening to growth. Growth has been slackening very substantially, and now industrial growth coming in so low has been a worry, and really we need something to kickstart investment in the economy. What I would say is that RBI's cutting rates is only one factor. This alone is not going to help investment come back into the economy. For that, we will have to see a lot of other measures.
All right, let's talk about some of those other measures later, but let me go across to Mr. S.L. Bansal to try and understand if he agrees with that view. Mr. Bansal, going with what Dr. Brinda Jagirdar is saying, we can expect a rate cut perhaps on Monday. What most economists really bite now is that it is going to be a 25 basis point cut. It will not be a 50 basis point cut, but the RBI will have to cut by 25 basis points because growth has become the top priority right now.
Yeah, of course, you are right. The growth has become the top priority, but there are inherent risks in the economy. For example, our numbers for the CAD as well as the fiscal deficit are quite high, and there are enough for inflation also. So to my mind, Reserve Bank of India would like to give signal only, and signal in the sense that they will try to create a positive atmosphere in the market by cut in reduction repo rate by 25 basis point and cut in CRR by 25 basis point, because cut in repo rate will be symbolic only. It will not translate into cut in base rate. But cut in CRR, of course, will influence the banker's decision to reduce the base rate.
So we are heading for a low interest rate scenario. Ashish Parthasarathy, would you agree with Mr. Bansal's view there that not only are we heading for a 25 basis point CRR cut on Monday, but also a 25 basis point repo rate cut and a CRR cut? Is that something that you would agree with?
Yeah, more or less, I think we are looking at a 25 basis repo rate cut. The lodging, this is a mid-term review of the policy, and normally changes in the mid-term review will happen only if there is a change in what RBI had expected, in their last review. And that the change has happened only in the growth. The inflation is more or less in the trajectory which RBI had forecasted, but growth is much lower. So that's a good rationale for a interest rate cut in form of a repo rate cut. But as all banks have been, commented, have said that any efficacy of the rate cut would be better if there is a CRR cut. Liquidity is slightly better in the system. So I wouldn't be surprised if there is a CRR cut of 25 or even 50 basis points on Monday, along with a repo rate cut of 25 basis points.
Parvez Umrigar, are we pegging just too much hope on RBI actually cutting rates? It's being seen as that one big game changer that everybody is waiting for as far as growth is concerned. Dr. Brinda earlier saying that it is possibly not the only thing that can help bring back investments. So why is such significance being attached to the RBI policy? Is it almost now given that this is going to happen and that we're going to see more policy action coming, and just way too much being pegged on RBI right now?
Well, we need in the system from an industry perspective, both from where we stand. We do need the liquidity first, and we do need the softening of the rate as well. I guess the liquidity will anyway lead to a softening gradually, especially talking from a perspective of the industry that I represent as infrastructure. That's going to be the leader in this particular 3 to 4 years. It has to lead the economy, and that specific industry is a finance-driven industry. So obviously we are attaching a lot of importance over the next 12 months to see the liquidity and the softening of the rate.
Now another 20 basis points and that's it. Is that something we're going to hear the RBI governor tell us?
Inflation concerns haven't gone away. At the same time, what I believe would give some comfort to the RBI, some elbow room to the RBI to be able to bring down, to be able to effect a 25 basis point cut in the repo rate would be the core inflation, which we see still remaining below 5%. But inflation concerns haven't gone away, so perhaps you could hear the governor again reiterate that further rate cuts would depend on the inflation trajectory. But along with inflation, in a tight liquidity scenario, it would be difficult for monetary transmission to take place unless we see an easing of the liquidity situation also. And that's why several of your speakers today and also bankers in general have been saying that we need to see a CRR cut, and perhaps this time, given the tight liquidity, we would need to see much deeper CRR cuts.
In that sense, actually, let me pose that question to Mr. Bansal and to Ashish. Would you be surprised if the Reserve Bank says liquidity is a bigger worry? I'm giving you a big CRR cut, but perhaps not a rate cut. To you, Ashish, first, before I go to Mr. Bansal, would you be surprised at that kind of an announcement?
I would be, but I think, no, I don't think. Rate cut, in our expectations, will come. CRR, RBI has at least in the past not shown, a keenness to cut CRR. They have cut CRRs only when the liquidity has been extremely tight. Right now, it is tight, but not that tight. But given the fact that so many sources are saying that for effective transmission, you require some amount of easing of liquidity, we would expect a CRR cut. But I would be surprised if there is no rate cut at all.
Mr. Bansal, similar view coming from you?
Yeah, I am of the opinion that Reserve Bank of India will take the twin step of reduction in repo rate and CRR cut for the obvious reason. Because as I have been maintaining, that repo rate cut is only symbolic. It will only signal to the market that now the interest rate has started softening. But ultimately the cost doesn't come down. So if the cost comes down, then only then the Reserve Bank of India will be in a position to persuade the bankers to reduce the interest rates. And for that it is necessary that CRR cut is to be effected so banks can get some funds which they can deploy profitably, and ultimately the rate of interest can come down on the advances.
All right, Mr. Umrigar, would that be enough to really change the sentiment and bring about that much needed boost in investments?
Well, the infrastructure financing is going to be a continuous story. The amounts that we require in this particular 5-year plan, and especially the pent-up demand that's also been accumulating on a troubled sector like energy. Gradually, with the phasing out of troubles on the coal side of the story, we would see that pent-up demand also coming to the fore. So the infrastructure is going to be the largest guzzler of liquidity, and perhaps the biggest beneficiary of the easing of finance.
All right, with complete policy paralysis here in Delhi at the center and also with the entire political drama unfolding over the presidential elections, the RBI clearly has a very, very critical role to play as far as the economy is concerned. Growth continuing to be a big worry, and most expect that the Reserve Bank governor will play that by at least cutting rates by 25 basis points and possibly a CRR cut coming on Monday as well. We'll have to wait till Monday to find out what really happens. But thank you very much for joining us and sharing your views. And remember, you can send us your views on We Mean Business. The details there coming up on your screen. You can send us an email at wmb@ndtv.com. You can SMS us at WMB space comments to 56388. You can send your feedback to me on my Twitter handle at Shweta RK NDTV. With that, it's a wrap here on We Mean Business today. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.